I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated.
We were kind of micromanaging something that just taking more away is not going to fix it. We need to fix our other things. We need to fix our light environment. So, are you getting, unfiltered sunlight every day? That's a huge thing. That helps us build dopamine. It helps us, build our melatonin so we can sleep at night. Are you getting your feet on the earth, which discharges energy, and, there's a lot of good research around depression and blood pressure and, people walking on the beach instead of, and rivaling, some of the medications that they're giving. So there's, are you doing those things? Are you sleeping, 7 to 8 hours a night? Are you having time without devices, and stimulant, blue light stimulation? Are you getting some balance there? And I think that all those things make a huge difference.
How important is that? I had a really good friend of mine, Greg Wells, on the podcast. And if anybody wants to go back and this guy's a genius. He is so smart. And he talked a lot about that. One question I didn't ask him that I'll ask you is that what is the percentage difference? I don't know if that's even the right question or if you can quantify that, but to the magnitude of how big of a deal is it for people? Because I think they, we put our phones down now at night. I don't look at I'll maybe quick glance at it before I go to bed. If there's somebody's text me or whatever, I'll pop off, but at least an hour, if not more, before bed, I don't look at it. We will watch a little bit of TV to decompress, but
I think it's important. I think that, and it depends what else you've got. If you've been on screens all day, and you haven't been outside and you haven't been on the earth, and then you hop into bed and you're constantly on it, and then you go put it, it's the first thing you see when you get up and the last thing you see when you go to bed. The thing is that our body has, like I said, it has sensors. And so a lot of our hormones are driven by our light environment and our food environment. And so in the morning, we should be getting sunlight from, that's unfiltered, and that tells our body what time of the day it is. It tells us that it's time to make, cortisol, and it's time to, release certain hormones. And then at night, if we're stimulating with blue light, it gives a different signal to the brain. And it's harder for us to release melatonin when we're sleeping if we've had direct, blue light before we go to bed. And so it's hormonal dysregulator. And the impact, I don't know if you can quantify it. There's a lot of research on it. But I just think it's impactful. And I think it's a really good habit. And also for people, sometimes if they maybe read for an hour with a dim light instead of being on their phone before they go to bed, they find it easier to fall asleep and they find the quality of sleep better. Yeah, and I think hacking your sleep is really important. So, working out how you sleep best. Do you need a cool room? Do you need a dark room? Do you need to mouth tape? That's huge. People breathing through their mouth versus their nose is really big for sleep quality as well. So
sorry, say that, mouth tape? What?
Yeah. So have you not heard about that?
No.
So a lot of people breathe.
I've heard about gag balls, but no.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not this mouth tape thing.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, there's, it's talked about a little bit now, but breathing through, we should breathe through our nose, most of the time. And obviously that we can breathe through our mouth, but often when we go to sleep, oftentimes our mouth will drop open, we'll breathe through our mouth. And so there's a lot of work around, breathing through your nose. And it's a lot, it's better for our body, but also for our breathing. So I think it gets the air deeper into the lungs when you breathe through your nose. And we can oxygenate the blood better. And so some people will mouth tape. So my husband, he does that.
So what, you just slap a piece of Gorilla Tape on your, or duct tape on your mouth and go to bed? My wife is all for that. She'll put it on at 7.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. No, so he has, he uses strapping tape, just mouth tape. But you can buy proper mouth tape that's not going to rip your face off, but he doesn't do that. But
right.
But yeah, so it literally changed everything. Like, he doesn't snore anymore because he's taped, so he breathes through his nose, but he finds the quality of his sleep better. There's a book called Breathe, actually, which is it goes into all the science of it and
Do you know who
understanding.
writes that? Breathe.
It's behind me, so I'll have a look for you.
Oh, you have it. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I have it.
Amazing.
So it's James Nestor, Nestor.
James Nestor, Breathe.
James Nestor, Breathe. Yeah, and so that can make a big difference as well to people who snore or struggling to get air in when they sleep, to have proper nervous system function as well. So I think that's the thing. It's like, what else can we tackle here except for taking food away? And I think all those other things make a big difference, and they also do make a difference to our hunger signals as well. And I think the light, I think people need to be in the sun. I think the red light has a massive influence on our mitochondria, has a massive influence on our vitamin D levels.
Okay, so before we go into too many of these, grounding. You have mentioned grounding a couple of times, like getting to the earth, walking on the beach. And look, some people in big cities are going to struggle with that. I mean, listen, there's a lot of parks in a lot of cities. It's not like the city planners haven't, figured that out. But
even concrete can have some energetic. Like, you can get a bit of a thing through concrete if you have to.
Right.
But yeah, it's discharging. I always used to think it brings negative charge into the body and helps structure the water in our cells, which is another topic.
Yeah,
we'll
talk about that.
It does structure the water in our cells, but it's kind of this discharge of energy. So we kind of, when we get our feet on the earth, it does help with inflammation. There's some really good some research around inflammation as well. It helps lower blood pressure. It can help with depression. But I think the thing is, it's not like you're going to walk on the beach and everything's going to be better. It's like, how do we build some of these things into our habits, like into our daily habits? Because just doing them once or sporadically, people are going to go, oh, I did that and it didn't make any difference. And it's like, well, it's a combination of all these things together. And I do think that, and I think you've mentioned a few times, but working on our relationships is huge, and having, good positive relationships and calm houses and, supportive people in our life, I think it makes a big difference as well.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to ask about grounding is grounding blankets, grounding sheets, like the underpads that people are talking about. Like, I mean, it probably doesn't do the same as what the earth would do because it's the earth, but is there an effect from this?
I think there's a place for them. Yeah. I mean, I personally don't use them, but I know people who have, and do quite well with them, especially when you've got people, like I said, who are living in apartments, because the magnetism is different when you're in a higher elevation. So the magnetism comes from the earth. And so I think that grounding mats and that can definitely be useful when you can't get on the earth. They're not going to do the same, but they definitely will be supportive. It's a little bit like vitamin D lamps and things. If it's dark and cold where you are all the time, it's not the same as probably getting in the sun, but it can help. And so I think that's the thing. It's what can we do that's, going to be supportive on some of those processes.
It's funny, like, so everybody go out and buy your grounding mat. No, but we've been in Florida for about 3 months now, close to 3 months. And one of the kind of the rituals that I've created is, if I have a 15 to 30 minute window where I'm going to be on phone calls, I'll literally go out, put my headset in, either take off my shirt or just sit in the sun and do the call while I'm sitting in the sun. And it has made a humongous difference. Like, I cannot believe the difference that it makes. Even now, like, I think the more that I've done it, I can just go and sit in the sun, and it actually puts myself in a different position mentally. I think sometimes there's an adjustment to my psychology or to my physiology that instantly happens. So, and so they say, like, Andrew Huberman talks a lot about this with not wearing sunglasses first thing in the morning, letting the light absorb into your eyes, and you're you're big into that?
I haven't had sunglasses for probably 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I don't use them.
For that reason? For 10 years?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I don't own a pair. I haven't. I just kind of you end up adjusting, but the reason is, and look, if you're in, it doesn't matter if you wear them. Sometimes I've just chosen not to have them. But I think when you get, like I said, when you get the morning sunlight, it stimulates dopamine synthesis, so that's kind of where we feel good. But it also, that's when our melatonin is made, and it gets stored and then released at night when it's dark. And so that's why being in the sun in the mornings can have a huge impact on your sleep as well, because like I said, we get signals to the body based on our light environment and our food environment. So when we start eating, when we finish eating, it tells the body what hormones to release and when. And so I think that those signals are really important. And again, I think that because we're hormonal beings, really, and we've kind of lost connection with other people as well, which does make a huge difference. Like if your relationship's not good, you're not releasing oxytocin correctly. If you're not kind of finding people that you're hugging and joyful around, and so I think that there's a lot of things impacting us at the moment. I think we're separated from other people. I think we've got this constant stimulation of dopamine on our phones. Which is causing some issues long term.
Yeah,
I think, and I think people need to find time in their day where they put their phone down and go for a walk, or they put their phone down and go to the park and put their feet on the earth. Because even when people are outside, a lot of the times they're still on their phone. And I think we need to disconnect and discharge more than we are. And I think that would make a huge difference to people.
And what are your thoughts on red light? Like, so if you live in a country where, the winter time, you don't get a lot of sunlight legitimately, like there's, would having a red light help in that process? And then it's just like people go, well, I don't have 15 or 20 minutes to sit in front of a red light. Totally get it. But it's about changing your ritual, right? It's like, well, you eat your breakfast put it on the kitchen table and eat your breakfast in front of a red light, which sounds stupid, but if it is that significant and it creates, that much dopamine in the body, and it really is then a trickle effect to, nutrition, to sleeping, to et cetera, then is that something that is an option?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially in kind of the darker, grayer cities that don't see a lot of light, I think lighting can be huge, and there's different light spectrums that work for different things. And I think if I was in one of those places, I would be going down that pathway of finding out what was going to be best for my area, in that darkness. And I think it can make a difference to your hormonal levels, your vitamin D levels. Red light is specifically I love, with or without sauna. It's really good for injury. It's good for the thyroid. It's good over the liver, So I think that, a light environment is huge. And if you don't have it naturally, I think outsourcing it can make a big difference. And I think there is a little bit of work around the mental state and depressive states in certain cities that are grey, and when they actually intervene with light, it can make a huge difference.
And how would you apply it? Like, what would you be recommending? Because you see the little ones, and then you see the giant ones, and then you mentioned like sauna, but there's red light saunas, which is, I understood, is not the same as a red light.
It depends. So it depends what spectrum of red light, and it's not my it's definitely not my expertise area. I think because my light environment is great here, and so I have a red light sauna, but I also have a red light that I use for injury. So different nanometers, so they're different, a different spectrum. But when you're in, if you're using it to kind of replace outside light, there's a different spectrum, and so it's not just red that you would use. And so there's different companies that will do, different spectrums of light for different things. So you might find a light that's got all different spectrums of color. It's not just red.
So there's sorry, just to sum this up, like I'm making notes here. So red light spectrums can range from like an outside light, but then you just mentioned something, you have one for injury?
Yeah, so we use an infrared. Most of them will be infrared. So it's an infrared light, and always for injury or an external infection. So even when my husband broke his ankle just before Christmas, he was still working, so he'd get home, and we put the red light on, and it was one of the only things that it relieved the pain and inflammation. And so we've always used like a direct light, so it's just a red light, just a bulb. And then, and the sauna as well. They're in the sauna. Infrared lights are in sauna too. But so you different lights for different conditions, and also for different reasons. So if you want to, like I said, there's lights that are for vitamin D and for kind of sun replication and things like that, which are a little bit different than the infrared.
Got it. Thank you.
That's a really.
I thought a red light was a red light, so.
No,
yeah,
it's very different, and depending on the strength of it is how deep it kind of can penetrate into the body, and different. Like I said, there's a whole spectrum of light. It's not just red. So yes, and that was something I would definitely look at if I didn't have direct sunlight.
Got it. And then, I mean, I want to go wherever you want to go. I do have a list of things. Like I did have sauna on the list, that I wanted to clarify. I know that there's so many health benefits, especially from a cardiovascular and reducing heart attack for sauna. So I'm happy to go wherever you like. And I'd also, I don't want to create controversy, but I do want to identify that there are, people saying things on social media that may not necessarily be 100% accurate. And I think one of those distinctions is didn't know there was a spectrum of red light. I thought, when you see an advertisement on social media and you see red light, you think, oh, okay, well, this must be for vitamin D, but it's different for healing capabilities versus feeling good or getting your vitamin D.
We can talk about some of the things that are being thrown around at the moment. And like I said, I don't know if you've seen it, but the glucose is coming up a lot. So a lot of people, trying to work out which foods don't stimulate insulin, or don't give them a glucose spike. So there's a lot of people following that trend at the moment. And I think that, that's a little bit dangerous. Not dangerous, but I think that it can really mess with our brains if we're going, okay, well, this food spikes my glucose, because if it's a carbohydrate, it's probably going to. The question is, is it coming up and then is it coming down? And, if you're insulin resistant, why? What else is going on in the body, rather than just taking carbohydrates away or drinking vinegar before you eat a meal.
What does the vinegar do?
So the vinegar does it blunts the glucose spike.
Oh, and what is the issue with glucose spike? Like I mean,
I think there's a lot of things that it gets quite complicated, but I think the basics of it is that we're blaming sugar consumption, diabetes and insulin resistance on sugar consumption. And I think that that's a little bit misleading. I think that the biggest problem, it's not that there's not high sugar in the blood in diabetics or in people who have insulin resistance, but it's what is happening with our insulin? Like, why are we insulin resistant? Is it because we've lived, in a stress state, in which we will oftentimes preferentiate fatty acids instead of glucose? So the glucose stays elevated in the blood because it can't get into the cell. So is that one of the reasons? Do we have poor thyroid function? Because thyroid's needed for the insulin receptor to open up. So there's other mechanisms oftentimes. Are we inflamed? Are we, what else is going on? Or do we have poor gut health at the moment? All those things affect our blood sugar regulation. And I think just taking it away we don't fix anything by doing that. Right. Because we should be able to eat a fairly diverse diet. And I think that's the problem we're having. I always try and my end goal is to get people to be able to eat as much variety as they can. And that way, when you can choose the foods that you love, and you can share a meal with your family, and you can, eat the cuisines you like without, going, I can't have that. It's got legumes in it, or I can't have that. There's wheat in it, and there will be some people who are very sensitive to those things. But in the long run, it's how do I build my body so it's as strong as possible, from an internal point. So how can I tolerate the most food? How can I be the most robust? And I think that we're lacking that at the moment. We're lacking that bit of robustness. where we can, most of the time, if you're eating really well, if you decide to go out and have a meal, it's not going to derail you. And at the moment, I think a lot of people are getting derailed off really simple foods because they haven't fixed anything. They just keep taking stuff away. And so my goal is always to try and understand the person's physiology, how they're set up, how to get them back to optimizing their health for how it should function. And then how do we build you so you can be as robust as you can, and you can tolerate stress better, and you can, and you can eat all the food, and you can, have an occasional drink and it's not going to, collapse you. So,
right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different for me. It's how do we you go back and work out what you need, but then how do we rebuild you so you can tolerate, the most food and also tolerate stress better, because we don't handle the stresses in our life very well.
I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I mean, that is a huge, that's a podcast on its own. It's probably 4 podcasts on its own, which is, dealing with stress. But I found I really found this today. Like we had like a super stressful morning. It was just about awful. Is the only way I could describe it. But I really could feel in my body. I could feel it in my body, which I would say in the past I probably haven't been able to. So I think my body's a little bit more sensitive with the work that we've done. So, which I think is probably a good thing to be able to identify.
And I think people don't realize. I think we live in that kind of chronic state for quite a while. The symptoms are just normal to us. We don't kind of recognize them or connect them to a stress state. And I was a little bit the same. Like I had a bit of a stressful start to the year, and I found some physical symptoms coming up that I hadn't had before. And I'm kind of thinking how incredible the body is that it can, be in a stress state and kind of throw these things out just from a mental stress or an emotional stress. But I'm having physical reactions. And what I also realized in that time too is I kind of started doing what most people do in trying to stimulate more energy in the brain, because I was kind of fatigue in the brain. But it was making it worse. And what I realized is I had to calm my central nervous system. Even though it feels hard because you kind of feel more tired, it allows you then to kind of decompress a little bit and then let go and actually feel it, because oftentimes we don't want to feel how tired we are. We just want to kind of keep going, and we want to do things that stimulate us more. But we don't get a lot of healing through that. We kind of just stay in that stimulated stress state, and that becomes normal, but we get the physical symptoms from it. And I think that, people sometimes just need to calm the central nervous system instead.
Right.
But sometimes that can look like being more tired, like more fatigued, because we're actually feeling the effects of what's happening.
Well, and I think people feel like they have to barrel through it, right? Just because it's well, I got to stick with it. I got to, whatever story that they're telling themselves, or I got the kids, I've got to, just bury this deep inside or whatever, rather than just take some time and sit. And
it will come back. Like it comes out in, like I said, if you don't deal with it, if you just push it down and keep soldiering on, it will show itself, whether it's, physical or mental later. But we can't kind of get away from it. And at the moment, like I said, we don't have a lot of tools to deal with it, and we're not robust enough that the body can kind of come back into equilibrium quickly. And that's the thing. I mean, stress is going to be, we're going to have physical stress, we're going to have, emotional stress or spiritual stress, whatever. But it should elevate, but we should be able to come back relatively quickly. And I think we're lacking that kind of robustness, not just in health, but everywhere really at the moment, in our mental fortitude, and also just coming back into balance is hard. We're staying elevated and in the stress state for prolonged periods.
We have a lot of women listeners, and I was kind of, what popped into my head was, women who are going through menopause and just the even hormone replacement, for whether it's for men or for women, and that contributing to body stress, which then therefore, emotional stress, and et cetera, et cetera. Can we chat about that here?
Yeah, let's do that, because it's interesting. That's been coming up a lot for me with my clients lately is that kind of menopausal stage for women, and really we don't treat them very well from a medical perspective, as far as I'm concerned. I think a lot of women will go to the doctor and they say, I don't feel right. I'm, mentally struggling. I'm putting on weight, whatever. And oftentimes they'll be told to, take HRT or take estrogen and take an antidepressant, and they send them home. And I think that we're really mismanaging our women through that stage. And it's interesting, one of the top symptoms that women will have going through that stage is, I just don't feel like myself. And so you go to a doctor and say, I just don't feel like myself, and there's nothing they can give you for that. Like, it's not a disease state. It's like, but understanding why that's happening. And I think that people they're not getting the information that they need about why some of that is happening. And, hormones, especially for women going through that stage, we think it's a drop in estrogen, but oftentimes that's not the problem. Oftentimes it's more progesterone and testosterone related for women that start to drop out in relationship to the estrogen. And so I think we mismanage it. And I think that by rebalancing those hormones, whether it's with bioidenticals, whether it's with food and nutrients, whatever we can do, can make a massive difference. That's for women, that's where a lot of divorce gets initiated during those years, because they can't, it's not something you can think yourself out of. And that's the thing. I mean, I've dealt with women who have, done the work as such, they've done everything that they know through their life to get their mental state well, and they can't control it. It's the hormones are bigger than themselves. Yep. And so it's like, I don't know how to, I just don't feel right. I don't feel like myself. And they're experiencing anger and frustration and lack of sleep and, things that can be managed, but they're kind of told it's just a mental state that they just need to do something, they need to meditate, or they need to, think differently. And most of the time that's not the case.
And so what are the solutions for that? Like, I mean, what would be the tests to indicate where the issue would be? And then where would the potential solutions start to arise?
Yeah, so the best test I know is the Dutch hormonal test. So it's a dry diurnal urine test. And it doesn't just give the hormones, but it gives all the metabolites. So we can not only see what the hormone levels are, but how they're being metabolized in the body. So especially when we talk about estrogen, is it going down a pathway that is protective, or is it going down a pathway that may cause issues down the track? And then when it's going through the liver, are we binding it up and protecting the body from it? And so it's important to see levels, but also to see how they're being metabolized. And that one also shows cortisol, so it shows the diurnal cortisol. So how much you make, and also how much is active. So we kind of get the metabolites from that as well, and we get melatonin, because it's all part of the same system. And so that's the one I would use for women who are perimenopausal or going through menopause, because it will show us the differences in levels. So you might find that progesterone is completely dropped, but estrogen is still elevated, and that's probably causing a lot of the symptoms. Or testosterone is really low, and we think that that's just a male hormone, but it's actually really important for women, especially going through perimenopause and menopause. And so what are those levels looking like, and how do we balance it? It's just about balance. It's not like we don't want to get your levels back to where they were when you were 20, but when there's an imbalance, it will cause symptoms. And so how do we balance it?
Sorry, can you explain the testosterone thing? Because that is, like, whenever I think about testosterone, I think about guys, obviously. And I think if we solve this problem, we solve menopause, we solve divorce rates, we solve the economic factors, we solve the happiness of most men between 50 and 60. So,
absolutely. We can bring the divorce rate down.
Right. Like, I mean, this is a big thing. And because it's men, huge. I mean, I have friends who are like, fuck, I don't get this. Like, I don't understand it. And they don't know how to talk about it.
She's a crazy person.
Yeah. She's gone crazy. She used to be like this. Now she's like this. And I don't know how to get through to her, or I don't know how to deal with this. So I know intellectually what it is, but holy shit. Like, it's like living in an inferno.
It's huge. And when you talk to the women, they feel the same. It's like, he is triggering me all the time. And I'm flying off the handle at things that wouldn't have bothered me before. And I can't control it. And that's the thing. So testosterone is really, really important for women. We just don't have it in the same levels. We don't need it in the same levels. But we do need, and so the best thing about the Dutch test is that the ranges are for women. So when you're testing testosterone for women, there'll be the ranges that would be appropriate for women. And so it's where do we sit on that spectrum? And oftentimes, I don't know, if your listeners have heard about the pregnant alone still, but all of our hormones, our sex hormones and stress hormones are made from pregnenolone. It's kind of like the mother hormone. And when there's times of stress, sometimes it'll divert those the raw materials to making cortisol to deal with the stress, and it can reduce our ability to make our sex hormones. And so it kind of gives us a look at that as well. It kind of lets us know what's happening to the whole hormonal system and the stress system.
From a guy's perspective, that sounds like a really bad thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. And look, and most men now have got, low levels of testosterone. They do. They're, and inflammation is a huge part of that. And the conversion, like I said, our thyroid is a really big part of that, and that's a huge piece for me in just about everything is the thyroid function, because it's like our regulator and our thermostat. It helps us with insulin, like I said, the insulin receptor. So it helps us manage blood sugar. But for women, especially when they're going through menopause, what happens is the ovaries slow down their production until they eventually stop making our sex hormones. And the adrenal glands have to pick up some of the work. And so women who are chronically stressed and going through perimenopause and menopause, it's a big load on the adrenal glands, and they're just not going to be able to give the output of sex hormones and stress hormones that keep everything regulated. So a lot of the symptoms are actually more related to the adrenal glands, because they're now trying to make sex hormones as well. And so there's this transitionary period for perimenopausal women, where we'll start to reduce some hormones, and then that's when they can get out of whack a bit, and we start feeling the symptoms of that. So changes in the cycle, changes in how we feel, how we deal with stress, because like I said, our adrenal glands are now starting to have to make more of the sex hormones. And so it's tough for women, and I think just telling them to take an antidepressant and sending them home is not the answer.
That's insane. I mean, to me, it's insane.
Yeah, and it's huge, and it's really important.
Yeah, that women are getting that kind of answer from our medical system, that drives me crazy. And so one of the pieces that I was thinking was, like, if a woman, obviously I'm not a woman, so I don't know, but if a woman goes in and sees a doctor, and the doctor says, hey, yeah, well, maybe they don't prescribe antidepressants, they actually prescribe some hormone therapy. To me, what I heard, it kind of almost sounds like, if you're not doing like this Dutch test. Sorry, I didn't get it right, but
no, you did. So it's a Dutch test.
The Dutch test. If they're not doing the Dutch test, like, how do they know if they're, because you've named estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone for women that are pretty impactful, and it's really not about driving more estrogen. It's really about balancing, finding the new balance for women, and that's probably, that's probably like individualized, I guess, at some level.
Yeah, and that's why for me, when I'm working with perimenopausal women, why the genetics helps as well, because I can see the speed of the enzymes in the liver that help detoxify some of the hormones, so we kind of can support that alongside of it. But yes, I think that just getting hormonal replacement therapy, I like bioidentical hormones. But yes, if you don't have the Dutch, most of the doctors will use, and sometimes they don't even, they'll just give you HRT. But most of the time they'll check in the blood. But if you're not checking the metabolites, and you're not checking, like, for example, free testosterone versus testosterone, you don't get the complete picture. And so I think it's there's a lot of things that can be utilised that are missed just by checking a couple of things in the blood.
I don't know. Well, I'm fascinated about this. And the reason why I'm fascinated is because I know a half a dozen women who are friends of ours who are in the middle of this, that are very close to me and my wife. And I just like, you hear the stories and I feel so bad for them. And it's exactly what you said. Like they feel like they just have no control so, um, well, I don't know what my question was in there,
What's my success
yeah.
rate?
Sorry. What's your success rate at working with women to help through this menopausal environment?
Yeah, it's actually an easy one if we've got support to get bioidenticals. So if you've got some support from a practitioner who can, because obviously I'm not a doctor, so I can't prescribe them. But if we can get that supported, it actually doesn't take very much if you've got the hormones balanced. But oftentimes, natural therapies are not enough. It's just not the same as being able to support with bioidenticals. So to give progesterone, it's one of the times where, it can make a massive difference, just a small amount of hormone.
And do you work with specific doctors in different countries that if somebody came to you and said, I'm having this issue, I live in Canada or I live in, the US, and obviously you're from Australia, so I'm sure Australia you have that covered, but do you work with specific doctors that they could go to that could help with this, or how does
Yeah,
that work?
there's a couple of good places now that will do online. So they'll do virtual appointments, and some of them let me jump on and give my 2 cents, which is great. And they can read the Dutch as well, so it's good. It's kind of if we've got that support as well, it can help. But yeah, in some countries, and it depends what the legalities are in each country for bioidenticals, because they're not always easily accessible, which is a shame because they're really useful. And you don't need big doses. Like I said, we're not trying to get women back to where they were in their 20s. We just want to try and get them balanced so that they feel better, and they don't feel like they're losing their mind, because it happens a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that are given to support estrogen, and I think that that's a whole nother podcast, how I feel about estrogen levels. But the other thing is too, after we go through menopause, the thing that people need to know is that the adipose tissue, like the endocrine cells, can basically create more estrogen, but we can't do that with progesterone and testosterone. So we tend to keep estrogen levels in the tissues. Like there's some biopsies that have been done in postmenopausal women, and the estrogen in the tissues were 10 times higher than what's in the blood. So I think sometimes just checking blood, it doesn't give you all the information. You have to work with symptoms. You have to work with, a Dutch test or something that allows us more knowledge, because just giving more estrogen and things that stimulate estrogen postmenopause, it doesn't tend to help. Balancing the other hormones against the estrogen tends to be a better way to approach it.
So the Coles Notes version is, I will say, what I take away from is number one, don't settle for what an antidepressant from your doctor. Number two, it's natural, and there are solutions. Number three, we will obviously leave your information at the end of this, so people can reach out to you with questions or if they want to get tested or whatever. And that there are, practitioners out there that, at some level we can source to try to help. I think those were kind of my summaries. I did want to just address like hormone replacement for men. Like I actually am on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. I had my blood tested, maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, because I was, this before we met, but I was super lethargic and so I was prescribed some testosterone in well, I would say maybe a medium dose or whatever. I don't really know, to be honest. And it helped, but actually, and then just recently, I actually had asked for a cream, and I've been on a testosterone cream that I rub on my forearms, and wow, what a difference. It's like I do it every day, like a small micro dose. And I don't get, because you used to get a shot or they can use a tablet or whatever. but mine was a shot that I get, once every 2 weeks. And I don't have like the any up and down. Like it's just super, like game changer for me. So
I really like the bioidenticals, and I think with testosterone specifically, when you do it in a low dose, especially as a middle-aged male, and you're not looking, like I said, if you get past a certain point of testosterone supplementation, you're going to inhibit your own production, but that's pretty high. But if you keep a low dose, it just brings you kind of back to that mid-level. It can make a massive difference. To how you function, and especially if you do it in conjunction with food and nutrients, what you can find is if you don't keep the testosterone where it is, so if we're aromatizing too much to estrogen, which that aromatase enzyme gets increased when there's inflammation, it gets increased as we age. So I think when you work on the food and supplements as well, and keep more of the testosterone as testosterone, it can make a huge difference. But a lot of men, if they're taking a small dose and they're not working on those other things, don't always see the same benefit because it does get aromatized to estrogen. And so it's if you haven't kind of worked on the food and on reducing inflammation, and sometimes it can help, but the biggest benefit will come when you work on the other things as well.
Right.
And for women, pregnenolone and progesterone can be in bioidenticals can be game changing. And so can testosterone. Like when testosterone is low in women, they don't need a lot, so where you might be taking 200 milligrams, they may need 10 milligrams, in a cream. And it can change everything. It can change the way we think. It can change the way we build lean tissue. And that's not, you're never going to get massive, 10 milligrams, but it can help us hold lean tissue. It can help, libido and, sex drive is really huge when testosterone is low. It's that's the other complaint I get a lot with women, especially pretty much all women at the moment, but perimenopausal especially. Some of those things are completely out the window. And so it can help you feel human again. It can be game changing in small doses, and just to bring things back into balance. It's really just about balance. It's how do we find some balance here? And if you can do it naturally, great. And women will go through it and have, menopause especially, and have all different, types of symptoms. Some will not experience any, but the ones who are and have these huge changes in hormones, a small amount of support can make a massive difference. And it's the same as men. A small amount of testosterone can be game changing if it's really quite low. But I do think, like I said, that the benefits of it are optimized when you start working on some of the other things as well.
I have some questions. Maybe we'll just kind of we'll go through a couple items here. We're into a couple hours almost. But I'm a big fan of cold plunge. I do it every day. And I'm curious if I've been doing this for a long time. But I'm curious what your take is on cold plunge and the effects of it. And actually I'm surprised like how few people, like as much as it's, kind of making traction on social media and all that kind of stuff, or at least on my feeds. So, might be different on other people's feeds, but there's a lot of people that don't do it yet. And I'm curious on your thoughts.
Again, I think you have to understand what it's doing and whether that's going to be beneficial for you. So the cold plunging, if you think about what happens, why people feel good when they do it, and we think about why. And so from a biochemical standpoint, if you were going to fall into a frozen lake, for example, right, to survive, your body needs to rapidly increase stress hormones in order to help you survive. So you're pulling, your adrenaline's going to rise, your dopamine's going to rise, you're going to be able to pull all of your blood flow to your organs to survive, and you're going to need energy to get out and survive. And so it is a massive stress on the body. You will get a transitory release of, like I said, of adrenaline and dopamine, and you'll feel good, and you'll have like this anti-inflammatory kind of response to start with. And so I think it can be useful. I think if you're already chronically stressed, and I think about more a woman who's under eating, over exercising, and is already stressed, which is quite a lot of people now. and doesn't have good stress tolerance, when you do that, I think it's just another stress on the body. I think it's got some value, and I think if people feel good with it, I just don't like it after training because it can blunt the repair. So don't you do yours after? You do yours before, don't you?
We do it before, yeah.
Before, yeah. So, and I think before is completely different. And doing that and then going to exercise also has its benefits because of the response you just got in the body, and then going to train, where after you don't want to do it after because it does impair the processing after.
Yeah, we do it before our workout. We don't usually do it on days we don't work out. And if we do it, we go in half the time.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think people are now trying to go, it's like, well, I stayed in for this amount of time, and I'm, it's like this competition, and it's like you have to understand why the body's reacting the way it is in cold temperature. And I think if you understand that, and if you use it transitory or use it, just before you train or whatever, and it feels good, I think do it. I just don't think that it's, again, I don't think there's one thing that's going to change everything. But if it's part of what you do and you feel good doing it, I don't see a problem with it. It's more the way it's talked about sometimes, where, I saw a thing the other day where some guy said, if I cold plunge for 3 minutes and that'll, the body will evaporate 1,600 calories. And it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, okay, if I hop in a cold plunge for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, I don't have to eat, I'm going to let go of all the calories that I ate yesterday, it just doesn't make any sense. So
yeah,
I think that
if everybody would be ripped if they were,
absolutely.
That cold plunge. And I can tell you, I'm not
absolutely
ripped.
It's the same as, like I said, and we've talked about this before, the fasting increasing testosterone 1,500%. It's not, it's ludicrous. Like if that was the case, every bodybuilder in the world would be, fasting and doing some of these things. So transitory, yes, they're going to have transitory, spikes in different hormones. And there's some research and some benefit to cold shock proteins, which is what happens. You'll uncouple, mitochondrial proteins and things when you're in the cold. So there's definitely some literature around it, and there's definitely some benefits to it. And it's very similar to heat shock proteins when you're in the sauna. So there's a lot of research around, the heat shock proteins. But you just have to understand that there's shock proteins, and it is a stress on the body, and so it releases these hormones in order to deal with, pretty much a life-threatening situation, really, because if you stay in long enough, you're going to die.
Right.
So it's a shock to the body. You release these hormones, and you release cold shock proteins, but they do have some benefit. They do have some benefit. I just wouldn't suggest going really long periods every day and trying to, to use it like that. I think if you can use it in a balanced way as a regular part of what you do and it feels good, I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, so one of my takeaways there was both on sauna, cold shock protein and hot shock protein.
Heat shock proteins,
was, and just please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just, I guess, reiterating this for the listener, but is a little bit of moderation. If you're in a stressed environment for a period of time, you may want to dial back what you're doing when it comes to sauna or, cold shock proteins. Like, it's not like, I got to do this every single day. I have to use my brain to realize where I am, what my body's saying and doing. And so one question that I did think of when you were talking about the cold plunge, and you were talking about women who are in high stress environments or high stress states, where would what would the negative effects show up? Would it be like inflammation? Would it be?
Not really. I think it just kind of is another stress on the system. So like I said, it just, when we kind of are in this sympathetic state all the time. And when we're in that state for a long period, especially, women, they'll find that it's harder to lose weight, and they feel, fluidy and they don't feel good in their body. And it's, what they'll do then is they continue to eat less and move more, and they think, well, if I, it increases my thermogenesis if I'm in a cold plunge, so I'm going to use more energy up. And so they do that, and then they, and it's just this constant stress. And it does eventually, it'll shut down our ability to burn fuel cleanly, and it makes a huge difference. So it reduces our stress, or reduce our ability to hold structured water in the cell, which is really important, which we can talk about another time. But so it reduces the mechanisms by which we make energy and we make brain chemistry and we feel good. And so because stress is not supposed to be there all the time, like that feeling is, you're not supposed to be flogging your central nervous system all the time. We're supposed to have a period of rest and digest, and a lot of women aren't getting it, a lot of people aren't getting it now, but women, especially with the hormonal flux, it's more damaging.
There are internet or social media influencers that are out there preaching like you got to go hard all the time, and it's like, if you're, I think I've said this on the podcast before, like, listen, if you've got a problem getting off the fucking couch to do the shit you need to do, then maybe you need a period of time to go hard and give yourself a kick in the ass. But if you're one of those people who, most of the people who are listening to this podcast are people who are out there doing it, trying to do it, seeking to do it, in the middle of doing it. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes we have to have a little grace for ourselves and treat ourselves kindly and fairly. So
yeah, I would rather that person, if they're really stressed, instead of getting in a cold plunge, just go and lay on the beach.
Yeah. Or go meditate, or sit in the sun. Go sit in the sun and meditate for the
read a book that has
minutes.
nothing to do with anything. Just to do something to kind of switch that nervous system off. Because I think we stay in this state where we reflex, so where we kind of keep going over things in our head all the time, and that's a really good sign of having low energy in a stress state. Is we stay in this ruminating period all the time. And there's actually some research paper I looked at the other day, and they said even just doing errands, like we had this huge change in people's brains, because it stopped them from ruminating, because we spend so much time in our own heads going over stuff. And it does release, like, our body will respond to things that our brain thinks like it's happening, even if it's not. And so that's why we can change a lot with how we feel, and that it goes back again to why our relationships are so important, and why how we feel about ourselves and how we talk to ourselves is so important, because our body will release hormones based on what we're thinking, not what's actually happening. If you kind of think about something that makes you sad, or you're describing something in your own head that makes you stressed, you'll have the reaction to that, like what's happening, to a degree.
Right.
And that's like when you think of PTSD, that the body will react to the stress that was there before that's gone, but the body will react to what the brain is thinking. And so we can keep ourselves in this perpetual state of stress just by how we think and what we're thinking.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes sense. When we were talking about cold plunge, hot or sauna, you talked about structured water, I think, in the cells, which made me think about water, and then I was thinking about the hydrogen water, and so I don't think those are the same. Yeah. So
no. So structured water. There's a book by Gerald Pollack actually called The Fourth Phase of Water, and he talks about water being in obviously gas, liquid, frozen, and then there's this fourth state, and it's what the water looks like in our cells. So and I think a lot of people don't know that when our mitochondria work properly, one of the byproducts is water. And so, but this water from this energy production is structured, so it's almost I think of it like a gel state. And so when you have this structured water, it actually it pushes a lot of the positive charge, or the things that we don't need in the cell, out. So it keeps our cells healthy and functioning well. And it has a really big connection to our redox potential. So when the sun comes in to our system, so that's why, again, being in the environment and being on the earth, it changes the way our cells are structured. And if we have good structured cells, we will make water. And this is when, again, this is kind of going off topic a bit, but when we talk about dehydration, and people will be drinking all this water and they'll go, I'm dehydrated, even though I'm drinking a lot. And that's because the hydration should come from the energy production. It doesn't mean we don't need to drink water, but the water we make in the cell when through our energy production it's a structured water. it's different. And so when we're dehydrated, it's usually because we're not making energy correctly, or we're drinking too much water and don't have enough electrolytes, because the water's the carrier, but the electrolytes are like the electrical potential of the cell. And so if we're just drinking abnormal, like obscene amounts of water, because we feel like we're dehydrated, it can sometimes flush out the electrolytes we need to actually produce energy. And so, yeah, I think that people don't realize that we actually make water as part of our energy production. And there's things that can interfere with that, and so it's more complicated. But that's why like I said, some of those other things make a big difference. The quality of our food will make a difference to the structure of water, our digestive system, our stress response, whether we're on the earth or not, whether we have direct sunlight or not. Those things change the structure of our cells.
And when you test somebody's blood, can you tell whether they're producing structured water, or how do you know? Like, how does anybody know?
No. I think there's some tests, but they're not available to anybody to check. But I think most of that will be in, are you dehydrated? And that's a really big thing. People, who are drinking water who feel dehydrated, or feel really lethargic, even, drinking a lot of water, and they get really tired. And oftentimes, like gut problems and things, we need energy to basically to balance everything. And in the gut, a lot of the time, our gut problems are because there's not enough energy, there's not enough ATP in the gut, and our gut cells turn over, quite frequently. And so when you have good energy production, the body does a really good job of balancing the gut. And so when we kind of get an overgrowth of certain bacteria or fungi, it's oftentimes because we've got a decreased energy production, because that should balance itself out when we've got a really strong, robust, highly metabolic system. And so, obviously, other things that interfere with that, if you've had antibiotics or any fungals, whatever, it'll change. But a lot of our issues are a lack of energy production, clean energy production, and that's the thing. It's working out how we feel our best. Like, what do we need to eat? What do we need to do to feel robust and strong? So that we don't have digestive issues, and we don't, there's a lot of things that we just assume are normal, headaches and, and not moving your bowels every day, and, some of these things, a little bit of anxiety, and there's things that people just live with and think that they're normal because they've had them for so many years. And then it's not till those things reverse and they go, oh goodness, I can get out of bed and I've got energy now, and I'm moving my bowels every day, which is a huge thing, and a lot of people don't do it. But it's huge for detoxification, especially the estrogen. Things will get reabsorbed when we don't move them properly. And so there's a lot more to consider. It's not simple, and this is why it's just not always a food story.
Right.
There's so much more. But I think, and that's the hardest thing, and I know that's a little bit challenging for listeners as well. And it's why I went down the path I did, because I needed to understand how to put the pieces together for people, and stand outside and go, okay, what's going on here and where can we start? Because people don't know where to start. But it's not a simple equation, because it's got to be individualized to that person. And so I would say, think about the basic things that you can do differently. Are you meeting, are you having good quality food? Are you kind of getting a certain amount of meals that works for you? Are you getting some downtime where you're not on your phone? How can you structure some of those things in? How can you get outside a little bit more? And I know it's hard because people are busy and they're stressed, but if you can kind of find a way to add some of those things in, it can make a massive difference when it becomes regular. So people with a pet, if you walk every day and you don't take your phone, that's a huge thing as well. Just having some time where you've got that downtime to calm the nervous system, and sleeping well, like I said, it's huge for everything. That's where we recover. We don't just recover physically, we recover psychologically. So when you're in your REM sleep, that's where we kind of sort out all our psychological stuff. And if we don't get there, it's really hard to do that.
Right.
And if you're not getting into a deep sleep, you're not recovering physically. And so there's things that can interfere with the different stages of sleep as well. But yeah, sometimes just getting the basics down and doing that well can make a huge difference before you start trying to do the 1%. before we start going, well, what pre-workout do I need to take? And, and can I go on a carnivore diet, or can I, and some of those things for a short period will feel good, because especially when you take carbohydrates out, you'll lose water, because carbohydrates will carry more water. And so people feel like they've, it's like, oh, I've lost weight in a few days. It's like, well, it probably wasn't fat. It's probably water for the first few days.
Yeah.
And and then you'll also, like I said, stress hormones, which will raise. That's what has to happen during that period, because you don't have any glucose, so you have to make it. When you take carbohydrates out completely, you'll feel a bit better, because to start with, and some people feel better for a fair while, because you've probably taken something out that was causing some issues. And you've also, like I said, you've gone into a bit of a stress state too, which can sometimes make you feel good. It's anti-inflammatory to start with. I mean, they give cortisone shots and things like that to suppress the immune system. So we kind of get this kind of an anti-inflammatory response to start with. But long term, those kind of low carbohydrate diets they kind of start to shut down the thyroid, and you start to notice it, because you'll get more. People will be colder, so cold hands and feet is huge. They'll be drier, they'll be sluggish, and it changes your mental state. So a lot of people, they can't think their way out of their problem, and it's called learned helplessness. And I see it quite a lot, and even in quite successful people, when you get to this state, they kind of won't know. They'll have all these things and they can't see the answer. They can't see the choices. And sometimes when you get the level of health up, and you get the brain functioning better, and you get the thyroid functioning better, you can feel differently about the same situation. So you can start to see the different options where before you felt like you didn't have any. And it's a common thing that I see. People, they'll say, I just don't feel joy. Like, they'll feel happy. There's nothing really going on in their life, but they're lacking that kind of joy. They're lacking the ability to feel great just with simple things, And that's a really, really common thing. And because there's nothing major going on, we just accept it. But people will know. They kind of, if they express it, they'll say, I just don't feel joy anymore. It's just not like, I don't get excited about, simple things. And like I said, and a lot of that comes back to some of these hormones, and the thyroid hormone is huge. And so, yeah, I think that's a big thing. And like I said, I think for me, it's never about just the weight loss. And maybe, that's probably where I fall short in some ways, because for a lot of people, I don't want them to go they have to go so low to lose weight, because if they're where they've been, that it starts to cause health issues.
Right.
And it starts to cause mental stuff, even if they will lose weight. And some of them get to a point where they literally almost can't eat anything. Like, it's the amount they have to eat to lose weight has gotten so low that it's affecting them mentally.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely not about losing weight. I mean, you're not about gaining weight, but you're not like, you are about building a healthier body, right?
Yeah.
And building a more resilient and stronger system, I guess, or for lack of a better word.
And I've had a lot of people who've have walked through big weight loss journeys, but most of the time they are people who had never dieted, who just had a pretty, had a lot of energy coming in, but really, and pretty, a pretty crappy diet. And it's easier then, because they've already got the stimulus, to, once you start doing a few things, they can lose weight. But it's hard for me to take somebody who's, maybe just holding on to 5 or 10 kilos, who's been in and out of this diet culture, who's already, restricting so many things in exercising and, or doing all these things, and go, okay, well, now we need to pull calories down even more. Like, it's not the way I like to function, because I know that they're mentally going to be off, they're going to end up with other health issues. And sometimes it's about building the base first. And building that metabolic resilience, and then starting to bring the calories back down. But it's a process.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier about, let's not make it about the 1%, whether it's like you should be wearing a glucose monitor, or whether you should be, what drink should I be taking before I go work out, my pre-workout drink or whatever it is. Like that, it's true. I mean, there are bigger things at play, and we have to manage the big stuff. And then once you get that stuff going, then you can start talking about the little pieces. It's like, when you were talking about it, it reminded me of one of the big things going on right now in social media is like cooking oils. Like what like sesame seed oil or this seed oil or that seed oil. And it's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be curious if you have a take on that, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, the hard thing is, I think really people would eliminate a lot of the problems if they just cooked at home. Because the thing is, the problem with the oils, we're talking about seed oils, like vegetable oils and seed oils, and there's some big discussions about them in the moment, especially the literature is showing something a little bit different than what people are talking about. I think that they're pervasive now, the vegetable oils. So everything we have is cooked in them. Like they're in everything that you buy when you're out. Even a lot of the restaurants will soak their meat in vegetable oil to tenderize it. And so it's cheap. It's cheap and easy to use. And I think people don't realize probably how much they're consuming. Personally, I don't like to cook with them. I think they're more unstable. I think in the body, even though they don't create people think that they create a reactive oxygen species, like oxidative damage, but they don't necessarily cause that, but they're easily oxidized. So they can get damaged if you don't have a strong, healthy metabolic system and you've got free radicals in the body. They'll damage the vegetable oils. And the problem with that is the byproducts of that will actually block us from using our glucose properly. So again, if you look at, for example, insulin resistance and diabetes, I actually think it's got more to do with the byproducts of vegetable oils than it does with kind of sugar. So obviously there's sugar in the blood, I'm not saying that, but why is it not getting into the cell? And one of the things that that can kind of interfere with that is these fatty acids and the breakdown of the polyunsaturated oils can block the glucose from getting into the cell. And it can trigger some hormonal cascades that are not beneficial. So I think in a system where you've got really good metabolic activity and the cells are making energy well and and cleanly, a little bit doesn't cause so much of an issue. Like if you're going to use a bit of sesame oil on your salad or whatever, it's not going to be a problem. I think the problem at the moment is we're metabolically deranged. Basically, most people have a really hard time making energy and making energy correctly. We're insulin resistant, and when then we're adding, these vegetable oils on top of that. And so I think and I don't think people realize how much they're consuming, because if we're eating out, you're eating it. Like it's in everything. That's
the big thing, right? So at home, is the solution, like, is the easy solution olive oil or?
Yeah, so I like butter and ghee and coconut oil and olive oil. Avocado oil is not too bad.
Oh, avocado oil, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So all of those they've got good. Can use them under heat. They're pretty stable, and I like them. I would prefer those to cook in. For sure.
When I nod and go, oh yeah, avocado oil, who's not doing the shopping in our family.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. Yeah. And I think again, the problem is it comes down again to the fact that things are super expensive at the moment. Buying good quality food is really expensive, but I do think it's one thing that has always been priority for me. Ever since I was young, and we forfeited a lot of things in order to buy really good quality food and good healthcare for my family, because that was priority to us. And I think there's some things that people can do if they just shift some things to be priority, and good quality fats is one of them, and good quality protein is another. And the rest is a little bit nuanced. So I don't think it really matters too much. But if you can direct even if you have limited funds towards those things, I think that, and just trying to cook from scratch. They don't have to be, complicated meals, but if we can try and get most of our cooking done ourselves, then what's going into it. And it doesn't matter if you eat out occasionally, but if you're doing the majority of the stuff at home with fresh ingredients, I think that makes a really big difference. Because it's really hard to know, like if you're super busy and you're eating out all the time, it's not easy to navigate exactly what's in the foods and exactly kind of what we need from them.
Dairy, lactose intolerance, and which I know you mentioned earlier that you were a fan of dairy. So I'm curious what your take is on dairy.
Well, I have an interesting story with dairy too, because when I was when I was 5, I was on chronic antibiotics from when I was little. I was a seized baby, and I had some gut stuff. And when I was 5, I was getting recurring ear infections. And I went under anesthetic. They were going to take my tonsils out or something, and I took a turn. I had to kind of died on the table. They had to bring me back to life.
Oh.
And I was only little. I don't remember it, but I remember then my mum going, I need to do something different because this is the path I'm walking is not working. And she ended up taking me to a naturopath who's still my mentor now. But he
Oh, wow.
at the time, he's amazing. He took me off dairy at that time, and did some homeopathics and some other things. I never had another ear infection ever. And so he kind of changed my life at that point. But what I realized as I got older is that if you can't tolerate dairy, there's usually something else going on in the system. People who have lactose intolerance, it's a little bit different. So you just don't have the enzyme to break down lactose. You don't create enough of it. So you can get lactose-free dairy is fine. And people will do well with that oftentimes. But my story was, I went off dairy for years. And when I fell pregnant, that's all I craved. And so I ate it then, and I did really, really well with it. And I think the quality of the dairy, like we're pretty lucky in Australia, we've got really good husbandry here. And so we can get some really good, dairy from pastured cows and things as well. So I really like it. I think if you're not tolerating it, if it's not the lactose, sometimes it's more of a metabolic issue. But I don't think there's nothing to suggest it's inflammatory. I think some people are not tolerating it because their metabolic rate is low. And I think that there's ways that you can work on that in order to tolerate it a little bit better. But it's very balanced. It's really balanced as far as its pH level is really balanced. It's got really good protein. It's got a sucrose carbohydrate. So it's got lactose and glucose together. And so I like it. I think it's kind of complete, but I know there's a lot of talk about, not having dairy and people don't feel good when they have it. And my thing is, I think that there's a reason that you don't tolerate it sometimes. And other times too, we've kind of changed, and this is the other thing, and I think we talked about this with pasta overseas and stuff, but even with dairy now, like it's mainly A1 protein, and a lot of people struggle with that A1 protein. It's a lectin, and it's different to break down. Where the old cows, like the Jersey cows, produced mainly an A2 milk. And people sometimes will do better with the A2 protein than they will the A1. But again, I think we've just kind of thrown it all out together and gone dairy's bad instead of going, okay, yeah.
When you said you did well on it, what did that mean? Like, what did you notice?
Well, it means I didn't have, so I used to, well, obviously I was getting these recurring ear infections, but sometimes, some people I used to feel a little bit sick or a little bit bloated. But it was more to do with my gut than it was, because the other thing too is if you have any bacteria in the small intestine, the lactose will ferment in the small intestine and produce a gas. So if people feel really gassy after they've had dairy, often, one of the things that can be happening is it can be bacteria in the small intestine rather than you actually not tolerating the dairy. And so because it kind of is a really good metabolic food, and so sometimes people aren't ready for it as such. So the trick is always to go, well, how do we, again, strengthen the system and build a robust system? And then if we added it back in, how do you do with it now? And once I'd worked on my gut and my thyroid, and I was in my late teens, early 20s, I tolerated it fine. I've never had a problem with it. I don't have any recurring colds. I don't have any ear infections. There's nothing I don't have any skin issues. Because I tolerate it fine now. Because it built a stronger system. And so I think it's not black and white with dairy. And I also think that we're lacking calcium to phosphorus ratio. I think I mentioned that to you once before in your blood work, because that was something that come up, is we're eating, like the phosphorus to calcium ratio is really important. It's important for inflammation and for our bone health. And now we're kind of eating all this high phosphorus food like meats. So meats are really high in phosphorus, especially muscle meats. But we're not balancing it with enough calcium, because most people have taken dairy out and they've added in, plant milks, and, they're coming to have an almond milk, or they're having soy, or they're having something else. And so I think in that way we've gone the wrong way a little bit as well. Like our phosphorus to calcium ratio is not for most people is not good. We're doing way more phosphorus than we are calcium, and it causes some issues, especially in the bone.
I'm remembering that conversation now. I forgot about it. Because I don't eat any dairy. Like, I mean, maybe I'll have a little bit of butter on some bread or something once in a while, but so I got to add that back in. I guess I'll get a lecture after this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And so and there are people who really don't do well with it. And it's not that it's an absolute master. And like I said, it depends. The other thing is too, I mean, there's so much to go into, but it depends how we're set up. Like, so where were we born? What is our, like, I do really well with dairy, but my husband is Samoan, and and what he needs is a little bit different than me. So not only what is your heritage, but where were you born? Where are you living now? So and I think we talked about this, even there was some really interesting stuff around athletes who had moved, it was NFL players specifically, who had moved states, and they were in a completely different environment to where they were born, and the injury rate was quite interesting. It was very different if they kind of were playing in an environment that they weren't born in. And so all of these things kind of make us who we are. So, and what we can tolerate and what we need. And so that's really important as well. And that's why it's never good to just go, this diet is for everyone. And even when you look at the blue zones, like the longest living humans, they don't have the same diet. There's some things in common in that most of the time it's things that they've been able to farm or have close to them. So they kind of have local food. But a lot of the similarities between them is more there's connections to other people. So most of them will have, a lot of these long living cultures will still have a drink a day, or, a lot of them will smoke, tobacco that they've grown on their farm or whatever. So it's not, but they don't have a specific diet. There's some that have more animal products, there's some that have less, there's some that have more carbohydrates, some that have less, but a lot of it's to do with, how they turn up in their relationships. They're happy people. And they're not living in this chronic stress state. So yeah. That's the other thing. Like, there's not one diet, and that's the hard thing. It's what works best for me, and there's a lot of factors involved in that. And one of them, like I said, is what is your heritage? Because somebody from Asia is going to deal with things differently than somebody from Northern Europe. Yeah, and even I've worked with a few Indigenous people here, and they're set up a little bit differently, and what they need is a little bit different than and so it's working those things out, and it's going, what do you need? And I think that's the hardest thing, and that's it's a hard thing to. It's why I don't have a social media presence, and it's because it's not just just do this and everything will get better, or just eat this way, or just take this supplement, and it's just not how it works.
Well, maybe that's why you need a social media presence, so that you can get the message out that it's not one size fits all. And maybe after this podcast, I'm gonna do a business intervention on you. Because
it's not a great business model.
It's not a great business model. You have a horrible business model. That's so true.
It's terrible.
It's horrible.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
but it's never been my thing. I do. Yeah. It's the only way I've found to help people. I used to do just like a one-off consultation, and it doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for other people, because they then are continually asking me questions, which is great, but it's like we really need a time. We need time together. Because I want you to understand. And that's the thing. I want people to understand what's going on for them and try and educate them so that they don't need me eventually. They can kind of go, well, this is what I know works for me. And when this gets off track, this is what I kind of need to do to bring it back. And that's the other thing in individuality, is that two people will need completely different, for example, supplements. And, and I think I explained this to you, my husband and I set up the opposite. And so, we need things that are completely different to each other. I need a lot of stimulation in the brain because I deplete my neurotransmitters very quickly genetically. And so I need to support those. But my husband's already elevated. He's slow breaking his down. So if he takes my stuff, it makes him, a crazy person. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of nuance in that as well.
Yeah, that was the story, not to cut you off, but that was the story you were telling. Your husband, Jay, took like all your supplements.
He took my supplements.
I thought he was going to go out of his fucking mind. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He rang me. He's like, what the hell did you do?
But which is kind of interesting, because when you told me that story, it's so many people think that the supplements don't matter, but when they're individualized towards your genetic kind of sequencing, if you will, I don't know if that's the right term, but it's that's where it makes the difference. That's where it falls in line. And that's where I honestly, I felt like I got such a robust improvement. Now I'm working the plan. Like, I mean, it's like, I'm pretty disciplined towards it. I'm not 100% by any stretch, but I'm pretty disciplined around it. And, we're always in constant communication with you. When I say we, my wife and I, and we feel freaking amazing. But
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think that's the thing. It's trying to work out what you need, and that's why it frustrates me a little bit with some of, like I said, and it's a much better business model to check 10 genes and never actually have to talk to anybody and just give them a supplement that you sell for those genes. But it doesn't work because the body it's nuanced, and it's got, some things will be slow, some things will be fast, some things will be not. You might have a genetic variant that makes no difference to your life at all, and just supplementing it is stupid. It has to be relevant for what's going on for you. And you even just taking, if you've got a methylation issue, and everyone, just take methylated B vitamins, and some people don't do well with those. Somebody who has slow brain processing, like you and like my husband, if you push that system too much, it can make them feel horrible. They can be angry and irritated and frustrated, and it's hard to calm down. So it's just understanding basic things that work for you. And I think we take a lot of supplements that we don't need. A lot of stuff that we've heard works, but is it going to work for you, and is it what you need?
Well, I think we threw at least 50% of the supplements I was taking, Tennille and I were
Yeah,
taking, right? It was maybe more than 50%.
Yeah, we cut them down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that they're bad or anything like that. It's just that they weren't kind of what the most. Yeah, well, you want the most bang for your buck, and you also want to understand the things that are going to make the most difference for what's happening for you at that time. So if it's cholesterol, how do we get your food and exercise sorted, and what supplements are going to be beneficial to help bring that down, or blood pressure, or whatever you're working on, whatever your big thing is. It's how do you direct your attention and your energy to that at the moment. And then, you just keep peeling back the layers. But that's the thing. It's not, the hardest thing is it's not just a one and done. It's not like, I will just take these supplements and eat this food and then go away. It will morph over time. And the stronger you get, the more food you can tolerate. Different symptoms will come up, and you'll need, just to rearrange your supplements a little bit. Yeah.
This is a great way to, like, we've been going 2 hours and like 30 minutes here, 40 minutes. This is like hands down the longest podcast I've ever done.
Oh,
which I love.
Sorry about that.
I love it. No, I love it. It's great because look, at the end of the day, if your physiology is not right, you want to get your business right. You want to get your relationship right. You want to get your mind right. You want to get your physical. Look, it's just like, it's like, I'm fascinated by this. I think you nailed it on the head. I think at the very beginning, energy is really, really critical. There's a lot of pieces that go into energy, and we can overtax our body that then undermines all the things that we're trying to do to create positive, not positive energy, but optimal energy. And it's crazy. I got to ask this question because I think it is, hydrogen water. You introduced us to hydrogen water. I think it's been game changer for me. I don't know if Tennille would probably say she's on the fence with it. Can you just quickly kind of sort of just sum up hydrogen water? You do hydrogen. You do the tabs though, don't you?
Yeah, I don't. I only use it sporadically.
Okay.
I use it when I travel because it's really good for, when you're going through radiation at the airports. It's kind of shown to have an effect on that. So I use it when I travel, or if I'm unwell. The extra hydrogen, it can be really beneficial, mainly for inflammation. Like a lot of the research is around inflammation and energy production, and and again, the structured water, like hydrogen ions, are really important. So yeah, some people. I think it's some people it can be a game changer. But I think that's, again, I like, the difference between you and Tennille. Like, she can't feel a lot, so I would say don't use it all the time, But when you notice a difference in something, it's good to to note that, because a lot of people take stuff and they don't notice anything. It's like, I don't know if I feel any different on it. And so if there is something that you do feel different on, and the hydrogen water can be really good. It can be good for the bowels. It can be, you know, good for the liver, but it's really good for inflammation, which is probably why you noticed a big difference.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I drink
and when you're unwell,
exclusively hydrogen water. Everything I know.
Oh, so you end up getting a.
We have two, and I never stop drinking it. Like it's
good.
all I drink.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a better way to do it in a more economical way, to do it than, because the tabs are, you know, they're pretty exy, but they can be really beneficial. And so yeah, I keep them in tabs, and they're good when I travel. And also if people are going to places where there could be possibly some you know, bugs that they might pick up from water and things like that, it can be great. The hydrogen water can be really good if you're unwell. That and activated charcoal, my go-tos if you're traveling.
Yeah, game changer.
As you know,
yeah,
use charcoal quite a lot.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people about that, because that shit works?
Yeah, it's actually brilliant. Really it's good. Just a carbon, so it's just carbon, and so it's non-toxic. The body doesn't actually absorb it, so it's an adsorbent, so it holds on to things. So it's like a binder, but it's really, really good at binding toxins, especially in the gut. So you can sweep estrogen. If you kind of drank water that's off, you know, if you've travelled somewhere or you've got parasites in the water, it can be great for that, and dysentery. You know, if you've got any infection in the gut, really, the first thing, even if it's not an infection, you know, it's kind of my first go-to a lot of the time if people are unwell, because it's such a good binder, and it'll just sweep everything out of the gut. It's really good to, as a poultice, like on anything that's open, if you've got an open wound or an infection. I remember when my son was really little, he only had one earache his whole life, and the only thing that stopped it, was a hot charcoal compress, and it's the only thing that took the pain away.
How did you do that? What did you do?
You just soak charcoal in like a hot washer, like a washer in hot water and charcoal, and they just laid it on his ear, and it pretty much took the pain away. You know, there's a lot of work on it, and it's non-toxic, so it doesn't, because we don't actually absorb it into the body. It can be it's a really good thing to have in the cabinet, and just go, you know, if I'm not feeling very well, or diarrhea, it's really, really good for. It's brilliant if you have like vomiting and diarrhea, if you can get it down. It's just one of those things that's good to have on hand in the cabinet. It's like one of the go-tos. You know, and I think I said to you, you know, my kids are now 21 and 18, and, you know, they've never seen a doctor, so they've never seen a doctor. So, you know, really? Some little things. I mean, and I would have taken, I mean, obviously I would have taken them if they needed one, but
obviously.
But they didn't, you know, and that's, you know, and so you kind of learn a lot along the way of little tips and tricks in, you know, when they're well, you can kind of keep them well and keep them balanced. And some of those things they're just good to have on hand. It's good to know kind of some of those little things to do, and you can try them first, you know, and yeah, charcoal's it's a good one to have in the cupboard.
Yeah. That what do we take when we start feeling sick? What do you put us on? Like charcoal and
charcoal and vitamin C. Vitamin C is a good one.
But we're on like more vitamin C I've ever taken. Like it's like 10,000 units or something. Like, is it 1 an hour? Wasn't it? It's 1 an hour.
Yeah, when you're really unwell. So a gram an hour. I've taken a gram every half an hour for a while. It can be really good when you start feeling unwell, to kind of knock things off before they. Because people think vitamin C is an antioxidant, which it is, but it's actually a redox molecule, so it can oxidize in reduced molecules, and so it's it's a pretty brilliant one to have, I think. And you can do pretty big doses. The worst that'll happen is your bowels get a bit loose, and then you can pull it back.
Right.
But yeah, they're kind of some go-tos that they're easy, they're cheap. Like charcoals and vitamin C are both incredibly cheap and easy to use, and they're pretty non-toxic, so you can kind of use them without having too many issues.
Angie, thank you so much for all of this.
Thank you for having me.
How can people find you?
Just by email.
Okay. What's your email?
Email or phone. Like I said, I don't have a social media presence. I don't have a business.
But you're on Instagram though, aren't you? I have you on Instagram.
Yeah, I've got a personal Instagram. I mean, people can contact me there.
Can we give
It's
that
just
out?
my name. Yeah, I don't care. That's fine.
Okay.
I don't have anything
what
business related on it though.
What's your yeah? No, you have like 4 pictures actually. I looked it up today.
It's just my Samoan pictures. Pictures of when I was in Samoa. That's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just my name, I think.
Yeah, Angie _Greenshields, as it sounds, green the color, and then Shields. And then your email. What's your email address?
So I've got my email is Angie.
Yeah, Angie. You don't even know your email. I'm going to do seriously.
I've got a new one though.
I'm going to do a. Oh, do you? Because I have a hot. Oh no. Oh
yeah, I don't have the one I sent you today.
I need my glasses.
No, it's so it's just Angie at reversenutrition.life.
Oh yeah, Angie at reversenutrition.life. I had to say it in English because you were saying it in Australian.
Yeah.
Angie, I mean, listen, you've been a godsend to us. We're 2 hours and 50 minutes. We'll see if we can edit some of that down, but I don't know what we can. Like, it's just fantastic information. When I say that Tennille and I love you, it's an understatement. And, we're so appreciative of your kindness and, your generosity and your passion for helping people. Guys, I can tell you, like, if you are looking to optimize, this is my pitch, because you've changed us so much. Like, if you're looking to optimize your life and your health, working with Angie Greenshields, I can tell you, you will not be disappointed. And like, you literally, I can't even tell you, and the audience that didn't know my dad, like, how you changed my dad in like, I mean, we literally thought, I didn't think he was going to come back from Mexico. That when we were going down there, I was like, this is not going to be good. And within a few short days, he started to change. And then, and granted too, he was, we're heavy doses of peptides and vitamins and stem cells. And we were at a company called StemAid in Cabo. And they did a wonderful job. And Angie is unbelievable at working with practitioners. She is so gentle and so, I don't know. I don't want to say the word obliging, because you're not, like, it's not like you're obliging people. You're just like, the way you work with others is unbelievable. So if you're looking to optimize your health, and you're looking to take your life to the next level in that area, I personally couldn't recommend anybody better than Angie. And I've recommended you to a few of my friends who I think have reached out to you. And if they haven't, I'm going to find out and call them. And you're not in it. Like, you're not even on social media. Like, here's the crazy part. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, is like, you have a message that is, to your point earlier, you said, like, identify the 10 genes. Here's a supplement I can sell you that affects these 10 genes, and read through the lines on who that might be. But it's a business model, and they've turned it into a business. I'm not saying that they're not, intention isn't pure and all that kind of stuff, but you cannot, the body's too complex. We've talked enough about different things that impact the body, from food to geography to mental state to emotional state to your culture, your whatever, blah, blah, blah. That it's impossible to have like a one size fits all. And so it's your genetics that drive it. It's made a huge difference for us. I love you so much. Like, I mean, I'm so deeply appreciative. Somehow I feel like I need to do a business intervention with you on the side so that I can help you build a model that gives you the freedom of your life that you have, but also helps, thousands, if not the millions of people that need it. Because to me, I think this is a source. And we said it at the beginning.
That's been the biggest challenge, I think, is it's hard to it's hard to do things on a scale that aren't one-to-one for
Yeah.
me. And I think that's why I've kept it like this, because it's the only way I can really help people that I feel comfortable with, like where I'm giving them, you know, everything I possibly can to help them. Yeah, because it's hard. It's hard just to give one piece of advice to, you know, to everybody. And I know that's challenging because it's like, well, what do we do and where do we start? And I realize that they're tough questions and it's hard to give an answer to. But yeah, I think the takeaway is get the basics down first and think about it more in terms of who you are and where you are, rather than just than macronutrients and taking food away.
Everything you've given has been awesome advice. Thank you for your time. And guys, you know, we said it, Angie _Greenshields is Instagram, and Angie at, what is it? reversenutrition.life.
Life. That's it.
Thank you. God bless you, girl. You have the heart of a freaking angel. Like, honestly, I know you're like, yeah, that's all I'm going to say. We love you.
Thank you.
Thanks, kiddo.
We love you too.
Okay.
Okay.